Welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout, I guess, 2 this time around, sort of. Today we're going to be taking a look at the history of the Intense Training perk. At least that's what I usually call it. But we're just going to be kind of going over how special stats have sort of changed thanks to perks, upgrading them, or some of the other things. So it's kind of going to be a mishmash in this video. The first time this was actually available to you was in Fallout 2, because Fallout 1 didn't actually have a perk that increased any of your special stats, where you couldn't get +1 to really anything. So once your special stats were already set at the start of Fallout 1, you were kind of stuck with whatever you had there, which made it so if you made not a great build to start out with, or a build that had problems that weren't foreseen, maybe it was your first time playing, it could potentially be easier just to restart your character and pick a different special stat spread, since in the older games, special stats did actually matter quite a lot, as opposed to later on in the games they still mattered, but maybe not as much, since they were just easier to make up for if you were lacking in something. In the very first Fallout game, it wasn't really like that. It was like you kind of get your one chance to build your character. If your character isn't really built that great, then you're gonna have to make up for it for perks, and perks only come every 3 levels in the older games, or 4 levels if you take skilled. So that was kind of awkward, and there wasn't really a great way to increase your special stats in the first game outside of things like chems or power armor, which just gave you more strength. So there was a bonus there, but the first time these kind of perks to change your stats really popped up was in Fallout 2, and in this one you could actually get a perk that was called Gain. Now, it wouldn't just be called Gain by itself, although it was always gain something, so gain strength, gain perception, gain whatever it might be. This was actually a level 12 perk, so it was pretty late into the game for a perk like this. You'd think that would be at like level 3, but special stats were at kind of a premium in the older games, so at level 12 kind of makes sense. And this was only +1 to each of the special stats, so you could potentially take it 7 times. I doubt you're going to get that high leveled in Fallout 2. Fallout 2 kind of gave you this option with this perk, and there wasn't any requirements for this perk, so it was always available once you hit level 12, which was nice. There was actually implants in Fallout 2, but they didn't really work like the implants in New Vegas. Well, they kind of did. You had to pay for them, and then you could get them attached to you, but they didn't give you like +1 strength, +1 to all of your special stats. They were more like the extra implants that you could get in Fallout New Vegas later on into like Old World Blues, and I guess after you got the special stats where you could get like the subdermal armor and the healing. Those ones were actually in Fallout 2 before they were in New Vegas. Fallout Tactics also had this same skill that was called Gain. It was once again at level 12 where you could potentially upgrade one of your special stats if you would like. And in Fallout Tactics, I would argue that this one became a whole lot better than it was in Fallout 2, since in Fallout 2 you could potentially just take the stats that you really wanted at the start. You wouldn't really need to go for Gain. It actually wasn't a bad perk in Fallout 2, as you could just use extra luck or extra endurance or extra anything really if you didn't really have anything else to be putting your points into. So it wasn't a bad perk, it just wasn't maybe one of the top pick perks. In Fallout Tactics, you could argue it actually as a kind of top pick perk for certain characters. It probably wouldn't be for your main character, because you would have probably already built something that you kind of want to go with, something you kind of want to build around. But since Tactics had a team building system where you had to, well, you didn't have to, but you could have up to 5 teammates on your team, and you might as well, since that was just more firepower, and experience was shared the same regardless of whether you had 1 person on the team or 6 people. So you might as well just be going around with 6 people. And this could actually make it so those characters could get other perks that they may not be able to. It made it so perks like Gain and also perks like Mutate were actually really good in Tactics, as opposed to in the previous games in Fallout 1 and 2, where those perks generally weren't that good, because you didn't really want to swap off your traits that you had already picked. You probably already picked the ones that you wanted to go for with your main character, but if you wanted to recruit some other characters that may not have the best traits, you could do that and then re-roll those. So that actually became pretty useful. It then became Intense Training around Fallout 3, where this was actually a pretty decent perk, especially not counting the Broken Steel DLC. Once Broken Steel got added, then this one did get a little bit weaker overall. This one was a level 2 perk, which was pretty good because there wasn't a whole lot of great level 2 perks in Fallout 3. There was Black Widow and Lady Killer, which in my opinion was probably the best level 2 perk. And then you had all the other ones that were just like +5 to one stat and +5 to another stat. Nothing way crazy, because it was really easy to max out all of your stats in Fallout 3. So picking any one of those might give you a slight advantage in the early game, but it didn't really help you in the long run all that much. Intense Trading helped generally more since you could take it 10 times. It had no requirement to it, and it just gave you +1 to your special stats, so that one was pretty good. But Intense Trading did get worse in Fallout 3 once the Broken Steel DLC got added, because then you could go above level 20 all the way up to level 30, and they added 2 perks. One of them in particular was a lot better than Intense Training, because they added no weakness at level 24, which this one feels like it should be much lower level than level 24. This one just makes it so all special stats that are 5 or less go up to 5. If you go with more of an extreme stat spread of going like 9s and maybe 1s or something, this one could be better, but since it's a level 24, it's just not worth it, especially because at level 30, you had the Almost Perfect perk, which made it so all of your stats raised up to 9, at least that weren't already 9 or 10. Raised them up to 9, which made it so you could just go around and collect all the bobbleheads in Fallout 3 and you'd have perfect 10s and everything. Fallout New Vegas would once again have Intense Training, and it would be the exact same that it was in Fallout 3. You could take it 10 times, it give you +1 to your special stats, and it was a level 2 perk. And in the base game, it was a pretty decent one, although you did have a whole lot better perks to take in Fallout New Vegas than you did in 3 at level 2, as well as you got a perk every other level rather than every level, where you could always throw Intense Training on in like Fallout 3 because there was plenty of levels where you were probably going to have everything you wanted and you could really spend the perk on anything. In New Vegas, this one didn't have Almost Perfect, so you couldn't really max out your special stats, at least thanks to that. You could do it in other ways, but Intense Training was also a pretty good option in New Vegas if you wanted to take it. Still wasn't crazy, there were still better level 2s, like you could take Light Touch, which was really crazy from Dead Money. You could go with any of the gender perks, which were pretty strong as well. You could go with like Rapid Reload, which was pretty good. So there was some other options that New Vegas characters had over Fallout 3 characters that were a little bit better. And then in Fallout 4, Intense Training would kind of just go away or become kind of a core mechanic to the game, I guess. Instead of picking a perk every time you wanted to level up, you could actually just pick a special stat to level up, which could be good. It depended on what your character build was going for. And if you got really high leveled, you're going to max out everything anyway. Not really max out everything, but you're going to get to the point where you could max out whatever the heck you wanted. You could have 10s in all of your special stats and be putting points wherever they go, and it would be fine towards the end game of Fallout 4. In the early game, this was actually a pretty good idea, especially if you seen a perk that you really wanted. Now, once again, you could just build your character more towards that, but even if you wanted to do that, could still make use of this, because it would still be useful to put points into whatever stats you were going for. So the Intense Training perk was actually pretty decent all throughout these games. In the older games, it was pretty good if you wanted to. Special stats were more important in the older games, and you didn't get perks very often, as well as they didn't have any requirements, so they were actually decent. Into like Fallout 3 and New Vegas, it was never really a bad perk to be taking, just maybe not the most optimal perk, or maybe just not a great perk for your build. You may not need it, but it was still something you could always take if you really wanted to. And in 4, it just became kind of just a core mechanic that you could build up your character, so if you wanted to do that, you could too, but again, it wasn't really necessary. So like the +1 special stat perk didn't really change all that much as you would kind of expect, but its usefulness did kind of change throughout the games. I would say it's probably the most useful in either like Fallout 4 or Fallout Tactics. Tactics because you're building a team and you may want to build your team a specific way, and then Fallout 4 just because you can just keep using it until you have maxed out everything. So it's always been useful, never been a bad thing, never been a great thing though either. I wouldn't ever say like any of these are like top tier, like must-have things, but they've always been decent. So tell me your thoughts on like the Intense Training type perks. There was also quite a few implants, like in New Vegas, there was the bobbleheads in Fallout 3 and 4 that gave you special stats as well. So there was a couple of ways to buff these up, as well as a lot of different armors could give you bonuses to something, whether that be perception, charisma, intelligence, whatever it might be. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody!